Okay, today I'm breaking down how I normally do digital painting from start to finish. I'm not sure how long this will take, how long or short it'll be, but I'll break down all the steps that I usually take. So hopefully this can help for anybody that has any questions or is doing any type of drawing in Clip Studio or Photoshop or whatever medium that you might be using. So here we go. Now to start off with, I usually make a oval for the face. If you want an idea of how I usually draw heads or whatnot, just look at the tutorials. I either have them popping up here in the video somewhere up in the upper part of the screen, or to be linked at the end somewhere, hopefully. But not getting too deep into that, I usually start there, and the center line that I use for the head sometimes is kind of like a base for where I'm at or where the character is facing when I'm drawing it, because sometimes I'll get out of line of where the head is supposed to be facing as it pertains to the body. That's just something with me, so don't pay that too much attention. But after I get the head down placed, I usually start at the neck and the traps, just drawing down, and I start to block in the base structure of the character I'm drawing and try to use as many like straight lines as possible. Try not to use too many like curves, just because using straight lines and really, like, I don't know, for me it just helps the posing of my picture, helps make it more dynamic. I don't know, straight lines just function better when I'm in this stage of the picture. But I usually get the base structure of what I'm trying to do in at this stage of the game. So I'll go ahead and block the character in here. If need be, sometimes I get really picky about like anatomical issues or anything like that, so I may like select the arm and make sure it's in proper placement, at least as far as my mind is concerned, and fix little things like that. Other times I may or may not care, or I may not even notice it. So it's in the early structure phase of the picture, so I'm not that pressed to it. This is just like I said, a base portion of the drawing, so you don't have to be too technical at this stage, because we're pretty much going to be drawing over top of this quite a bit. At least I know when I do it, I draw over this at least 2 more times, just with way more detail at each stage. Then after I finish the actual structure of the picture, I'll have a better idea of like the placement and the way that I want the face position, at least the details of it. So I'll block in a line for like the eyes, the nose, and the mouth, and I'll usually create a portion of the hairline from there, just to have somewhat of an idea. Now after this phase, I'll usually lighten up the initial drawing that we just did, at least that base sketch for the structure. And I'll normally do that with the color blue for all the lines in that phase. You can choose any color you want, just blue lighter functions better for me. And then after that point, I make a new layer and choose the color red, just because it's a lot more intense and it stands out more on top of the blue. And after lowering the opacity on the blue, I'll draw over top of that with the color red, and I'll start placing in details on top of the lines that we just drew for the structure. So as you can see here, the blue's a lot lighter than what I initially drew, and now we're going ahead on top of it and doing details for like the hair. We're filling the nose in, getting details for the eyes, etc., etc. Just blocking in what the actual picture of the character is going to look like from there. And here I get real sketchy with the details, just because like any small details that may crop up in anything that I may like in the drawing, anything, I drop that type of stuff in here. Some details I may end up scrapping when I do the official line art for the picture. Some I may keep, I'm not sure, but that's why I just sketch all the things that come to mind and see what it looks like. So at this portion, you're pretty much just drawing over top of the lines that you previously created. You can almost look at it like tracing over top of your sketch, only you're not tracing, you're actually like drawing the real details of your picture over top of your initial sketch art. And just go about the entire character from head to toe. And after you block all the details in, you can come back in and start drawing the actual physical anatomy that's showing obviously underneath the rest of the clothes that you've added. So in this picture of Scorpion, I'm like getting details in on the wrist tape, getting details in like the actual ninja outfit, the kunai, all that type of stuff. I'm really blocking all that in. Like I said, getting really as intricate as possible at this phase. And then once that finished, just like I did with the blue sketch art, I now make that even lighter, if not just absolutely hide that altogether. And then I take the red art that was just completed and I lower the opacity on that, and now we do the real line art. Here you want to go on top of it, and I draw in the actual line art over top. So now I am tracing the lines that I just did, only I want cleaner, more solid lines this time. It still may not be perfect, but you want it to be as crisp and as near perfect as humanly possible here. Or not near perfect, because you'll be erasing all day, but you know what I mean. You want solid lines at this point and not so much of a sketchy look. Unless a sketchy look is what you're going for, then you can skip this step entirely, and in theory you could have just used the black lines instead of the red ones and just tried to fill that in and color it. That's just a lot more time consuming from a color standpoint, and I don't know, my brain likes organized chaos. That's a little too unorganized for me, so I don't do that. So instead of using the actual sketch line work, which will require way too much intricate coloring, I redraw with the solid lines instead. And I can use the magic wand tool to sort of block out areas that I've already drawn, so I don't sort of like have lines intersecting it or drawing over top of it like I just did with the mask. So stuff like that helps a lot. Now obviously those were details that I added into the picture that weren't initially there. If you feel like there's any things that you may need to add, of course you can do it at this stage as well. At any stage that you're drawing at, I mean, it's your picture. If you feel like there's something that you need to add, just go right ahead and do it. I do that a lot. There's always little details that I feel like I may have missed out on that I end up going back and adding later. So after adding all of your line detail, now comes the fun part where we actually start coloring. So for the coloring aspect, I know me personally, it's a lot easier to use the magic wand tool. So what I do is I'll start selecting individual pieces of the inside of the line art, and I'll color inside of that. And I do it on the new layer just because I just find it easier to have everything labeled in its own separate layer. Like I said, I'm organized chaos here. Like I like things to be structured a certain way. It just helps my brain make sense out of everything. But then I come back in and I color everything. Like I say, the magic wand tool helps. That's why, as you can see, there's a lot of unnecessarily erasing and stuff that I have to do. That gets irritating after a while. So the magic wand tool helps out a lot at preventing you from having to do that so much. Also, it gives you the benefit of being able to select multiple areas that use a similar color and just select that all at once and then fill it in. A probably big example of that would be when I get to coloring in the skin of this picture. And here we are. I select all the parts of the skin that's showing, I find the color for the skin, and I just click all the areas that has the color present. And anywhere that I miss, I just go in and clean those details up. Or any area that needs any touch up from the actual, just either me not selecting it or there being a problem in the selection, I just go in and clean that up manually. Now I finish cleaning the stuff up and adding details. And after I finish coloring, now I create another layer and I go on top of the picture and start coloring in the shadows. So I'll have one new layer for the shadows and I'll create an entirely different layer for the highlights. So for now, go ahead and doing the shadows in the arm using a darker color from the actual skin tone. So just darkening up that real tannish color and using that for the shadows. I'm not going to get too deep into like color theory as to using warm and light colors for the shadows and highlights. Just know that whatever you use, if you're going to go that route, if you use a warmer color for the shadows, you need a cooler color for the highlights. So basically more reddish in one end and more bluish in the other, as a simple way of putting it. That's not set in stone, but that's an easier way to think about it. But if all else fails, just use a darker version of the initial color that you already have and you'll be all right. Just little food for thought there. I know I myself have been guilty of just coloring with the color black on low opacity or white on low opacity, so it all depends on you. Also, at this stage is also where you really want to commit at picking where your shadows will be coming from and where your light source is. That's also pretty important as well. So obviously in my case, my light source will be coming from somewhere on the left side of the picture facing Scorpion in this case. Alright, now having finished all that up, now we can start getting into the good stuff, and that's the highlights. So now we want to pick a lighter color, and we're going to start filling in areas where the light's hitting the character in the picture. And rather than just doing real big old specks of, or really big areas of light shading, which you can do if you want, on the opposite side of where the shadows are, you can do that, but I just like adding specific highlighted areas instead. For my pictures personally, it makes them look better as opposed to just adding big light blobs to whole areas of the picture opposite from where I did my shadows. So basically what I mean is, if I have a circle and I drew shadows on the far right side of the circle, just taking a real light blob and adding nothing but highlights on the other side of the circle. Which there are times, depending on what you're drawing, where you may need to do that, but I don't know, when drawing human beings and like physical anatomy and form, I try not to do that as much anymore. Trying to improve as an artist, I guess. But my little sidebar aside, just continue adding highlights in on the picture here. Also, try not to get extremely crazy adding highlights to the picture as well, unless you want really, really intense shadows and highlights. Don't go overboard with that, because it can eventually start to add a certain tackiness to your picture. I know my own pictures have a tendency to have that happen as well. You don't want that. But the more you do it, the more you'll experiment. You'll know how much sort of that light and dark combination that you want in your own picture. So you'll figure it out as you keep drawing. A lot of this painting stuff is trial and error anyway, so you'll figure it out. Okay, so now that the highlights are in, you get to the last phase of the picture, at least as far as how I normally do it. And at this state, I'll create once again a new layer. And now I'm doing specular highlights. Or basically you can just look at this as a secondary highlights layer. And now really, really, really intense shine or highlights in the picture. I'll usually take like a extremely light color like borderline white and just do highlights in very specific areas. So here, as you can see, I'm doing highlights just off the edge. This might be a crazy picture to use as an example for a tutorial, but for this particular one, this may be going a little overboard, because now that I think about it, I did want a bit of a glow effect for Scorpion in this, simply because I started painting like fire and all the extra nonsense after the fact when I finished this. So this is something that's just, as far as the amount of specular highlights to this is unique to this Scorpion picture. You don't want this much in terms of highlights for your own artwork. But like I said, I wanted a fiery, almost glow effect for Scorpion, and I also did it for his eyes as well. So this part of the picture is an exception and not necessarily the rule. But the rest of this is just small little added details that I threw in after the fact. So after you have the basis of it basically blocked in, you've drawn the character, you've done their coloring, you've did their shadows and their highlights. If you wanted to go in and add specular highlights, you can from there, as I'm continuing to do. But for all intents and purposes, you could be done right there. Like, you could be finished and call it quits. All I'm doing now is just adding just effects and doing little goofy like painting stuff just to make the picture unique for me. If you want to do little stuff like this, or you want to draw your characters to have a background, or maybe you just want to leave it in like a solid color background, like a black or a white or a different color, you can do whatever you want to at this phase. Like I said, it's your pictures. You'll figure out how you want your artwork to look. But as a basic tutorial, that's pretty much it. So just to recap, sketch out your lines with sort of blue line art. After sketching out the base of it, you come back, and draw over top of that, adding your details of how you want things to truly look with a red color on a new layer. Then drawing over top of that, tracing over the lines with solid black lines just to clean it up, and then going from there, coloring the picture, going over top of that with your shadows, going over top of that with your highlights, and then if necessary adding specular highlights if you want to the picture, and calling it a day. So if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave those below. Like and subscribe if you haven't, if you're new to the channel. If you have any comments or questions, just go ahead and leave them below. I'd appreciate it. Like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and have a good one. I'm out.